Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Sports Daily as we begin a week in the dog days now of NFL training camp, right on the cusp of the Major League Baseball trade deadline. Lots of action there. Conference realignment rumors are heating up. A lot to get to today, a lot to get to this week, quite frankly. I'm Jacob Albracht alongside Tommy Castor. Jad Chambers producing for us. The IHOP hotline is open for you, 869-1240. That number. You are listening to us on KFH or on our Odyssey app. You might be watching us on our video stream, which you can find on our KFH YouTube page, our Sports Daily KFH Facebook page, on Twitter as well. Tommy, happy Monday. How are you?
I'm good. Good to see you this morning. Hot weekend, hot week ahead. I feel like we are truly in the dog days of summer right now.
Yes, we are. It is the dog day, and boy, they're feeling it at NFL training camps. You got fights happening all over the place, which, you know, that tends to happen when you're out there sweating and people are messing with you and pushing with you. It's like if you ever had a brother and at some point you just get, or really any sibling, and you get messed with enough and you just swing, you swing at it. The Royals making some moves. One is a bit of a head scratcher. Will they make any more? We'll get into that as the Major League Baseball deadline now. What are we? Are we about 24 hours away? What is the active timer here on the trade deadline?
I thought it was tomorrow at
it's
4
tomorrow
o'clock,
at 5. It
believe.
is tomorrow. I'm just looking for the time of it. It is tomorrow at 5 this year. So it's a 5 o'clock deadline. So this is usually the time where things go crazy. It was a very active it was an active weekend for the trade deadline, and boy, Royals fans, not a lot to get real excited about, but we'll get into it in just a little bit as we make our way through here today. Conference realignment rumors are swirling over the weekend. Lots of rumors and interesting things happening in conference realignment. There are thoughts and reports out there. So this is, we've warned you on this. It's real crazy on social media when it comes to conference realignment. And most of it is, it's either not true, Tommy, or it is just based on the smallest things. And there's so much moving on. It's a wild thing to keep up with. But, we're trying to follow as best we can. It looks like the Pac-12 will be meeting again. It appears that the Big 12 is staying aggressive, and we could have more major shakeups in that world coming relatively soon, right? I mean, I think something's going to happen. We talked about this at the end of the week. Something else is going to happen. It's just, when does it happen? Colorado happened. Boy, it feels like in the next few days we'll have another major shift.
Right. And right now, as of right this second, it seems like it's all rumors and innuendos and things like that. when you're connecting other schools to the Big 12. But man, I don't think that anybody, when they saw that Colorado was coming to the Big 12, thought, okay, well, they're done. The Big 12 is done expanding. Like, I think everybody thought, all right, Colorado is in. Who's going to be next? And, there have been, reports connecting Arizona to the Big 12. In fact, that's been going on for quite a while, even before Colorado made the announcement to switch over. But Arizona's been connected. Oregon and Washington have been connected. And then even some other schools outside of the Pac-12. We've talked about UConn before. We've talked about Memphis before. There are several other schools that, at least through different reporting and rumors that are going around, that have been connected to the Big 12. But I would imagine that right now Brett Yormark has his eyes on Arizona. That would, in my mind, is the next one. That seems like the most logical fit for the Big 12. And really, when you go back and you look at everything that's happened with the Pac-12 and their media deal that they still have not announced, there have been a lot of schools in the Pac-12 that have been vocally in support of the Pac-12. Really, Arizona has not been one of them. They've been very, very quiet during this entire process. So to me, that, I think that that's part of it. And just knowing that if they join the Big 12, they immediately get the full share of the rights deal, that their share of that. It's like $31 million right off the bat. That's money that they know they're going to get. They don't know what they're going to get with the Pac-12. So to me, that would make the most sense.
Here, I think they're going to go try to go bigger than just Arizona as far as going back into the Pac-12. I mean, if there's any truth to Washington and Oregon, you add Washington and Oregon. And then if you add those two in Arizona, you still need one more. Somebody thinks, I don't even remember who reports this stuff anymore. Half the time it's just people. So, take all of this, please, with a grain of salt, because it is all salty, right? It's all just people heard from, again, somebody's cousin's brother's uncle who happens to work in the department and overheard somebody in one room saying kind of stuff. But then if Arizona came, Arizona State would come, and that gives you at that point. But 3 gives you the even number, right? So is it, is that enough? I don't know. I don't know what to expect. I just think that the Big 12 is going to go big right now when it feels like the Pac-12 is as vulnerable as it's going to be, right? Like at some point, and there were rumors about their TV deal being not very good over the weekend. Like, again, it's just so hard to sort through what actually sticks here. But I do think this, when there's this much smoke, there's fire. Something probably, whether it's another, no, we're good with the Pac-12 sort of like public facing statement or, unity type thing, that may come, but something's going to come. This isn't going to be a quiet week, I don't think, at the minimum, right? That at least is coming. So we will keep our ear on that. We will pay attention to it and get you the latest. And we'll have fun with that one. Look, sometimes it's like, we don't really want to talk about it unless it's got legs, but with conference realignment, it's all over the place. So if we hear wacky stuff and it seems like it comes from anybody who might have any sort of connection, we'll let you know. But again, just we're going to preface all of this with the grain of salt thing. Like, don't take this as like hard reporting on the conference realignment stuff. Colorado came out of nowhere, right? Like people had been talking about it forever, and then boom, it happens, and nobody saw it coming at the moment.
And don't discount the Big Ten either in all of this. I mean, they've been very, very quiet, right? Like they added USC and UCLA, and that's really basically been all that they've done. I've heard and I've read these rumors that Oregon and Washington would love to go to the Big Ten. That doesn't surprise me a whole lot. So I don't know if the Big Ten is interested in them. But there was reporting over the weekend about a couple of schools from the ACC being connected to either the Big Ten or the SEC, like Florida State and Clemson. So again, like we've been focused on what's happening with the Big 12 and Colorado coming back over and who else Brett Yormark could target. But I think conference realignment as a whole, big picture, we're nowhere near done.
We're not. We're not at all. So we will keep our ear on that. We will keep just kind of sort of keep you in line there. In NFL training camps, Travis Kelce throws a punch. We'll get into that. The one thing I do want to get to, because it sort of happened late in the week and we haven't had a chance to talk about it. We mentioned the Sean Payton beef. Aaron Rodgers comes back hard defending Nathaniel Hackett and things. And it really does. Like, I'm pretty fired up for the Jets, and I really hope Rodgers plays well because I think it's going to be a blast. He keep his name out of your mouth. It's like the Will Smith, Chris Rock thing, right?
Yeah.
Like it's I don't know if that's where he was pulling from, but before Will Smith said that and slapped Chris Rock, I'd never heard keep that name out your mouth as far as Will Smith, and Rodgers went back to that. I don't know if that's where he was going, but I love the energy, right? Like and Sean Payton today, like you got to think like Sean Payton's like, what the hell was I doing? Like, why did I do that?
Yeah.
Like, come on now. He knows better than that.
He walked it back over the weekend and, said that he had his Fox hat on when he said that, and he needs to be better. And you and I talked about it a little bit on Friday about his comments about how, really rallying the troops and getting, the Broncos fan base behind him and, showing that in his mind, they're going to be significantly improved this year from last year. Russell Wilson, the same way. He just took it a little bit too far by throwing shots at the Jets. And you know what? It's okay in my mind. It was even okay for him to call out Nathaniel Hackett's performance because it was universally understood as terrible last year, right? So that's nothing new. I'm okay with that. I just didn't love him taking shots at the Jets organization.
Well, yeah, I don't care. I mean, let's not get offended. And I get it. I wouldn't do it. Obviously, I don't think it's productive. But these guys talk trash all the time. Let's not pretend we're so offended. And for Rodgers, he probably is because that's his boy, right? Like that's actually a close friend. I get that, and I get why Rodgers is going to jump to his defense. But let's not all overreact and pretend like these guys don't talk trash. Like they're world-class trash talkers. They're the most competitive people in the world. Sometimes it's just easier not to say that stuff publicly, but I like that Rodgers is that invested. We're seeing with the contract restructuring and those kinds of comments, like he seems to be very much fully invested and ready to roll. That's good for football.
Yeah.
Like I love that part of it. Now he's sort of he's like Sean Payton setting himself up for a soft landing. I actually think that's like totally wrong. Sean Payton putting more pressure on himself because Sean Payton's trying to say this roster's good. It was just the coaching. So by that logic, right? Like if they stink, then he's not a good coach either. So I don't think he's setting himself up for a soft landing. I think he's actually intensifying the pressure on himself when you say things like that. That's why I wouldn't have said it if I was Sean Payton.
Right.
Like, dude, what if you suck again this year? You just said it was the coaching that made this team suck. So if you suck, it's the coaching.
Well, and Sean Payton also has some equity built up in the NFL, right? So even if they stink this year and they're not good, even if there are fingers pointed back at Sean Payton, there's a big difference between the universal opinion of Sean Payton and the universal opinion towards Nathaniel Hackett. So I think that Payton will have a little bit of a longer leash, obviously, even if it doesn't go super well this year for the Broncos. I think there will be improvement, but even if it doesn't go, super well over the top, I think he's got kind of a longer leash to work on. Going back to Aaron Rodgers, though, it wasn't that long ago that we were on this show talking about his darkness retreat and if he even cared about playing football anymore and all, just basically questioning whether or not Aaron Rodgers still had the desire to go out there and perform at the highest level. And not only has this trade happened, and we'll see how it goes on the field this season and see if there are growing pains and if he's got to work his way through adversity or whatever. But at least right now, for me, it's refreshing to see Aaron Rodgers completely bought in. And, because I had this concern that they were going to trade him to the Jets. He would, be, I guess, okay with it at first, but then really not be bought in and it would be a disaster and not work out. The way that he's been invested in restructuring his contract, saying he's going to be there for a couple of years, and that wouldn't be fair to the Jets if he was only there for 1 year. Coming to the defense of the organization and Nathaniel Hackett and Robert Saleh, that shows me that I think we're going to see good Aaron Rodgers, maybe even great Aaron Rodgers this year with the Jets, and I can't wait.
If he can physically still get it done. That's what we got to see. But mentally and like emotionally, he's all in, I think. So that's another good story out there to chat about. IHOP hotline 869-1240. And then the other thing before we take a break that we'll spend some time with, I'm sure, at least today and longer, is the Jonathan Taylor situation in Indianapolis. I told you this was going to get ugly. I told you this was going to get ugly when these guys started to, when again, when there's smoke, there's fire. Like, these guys are not happy about what's happening with running backs. And, Saquon Barkley took it to a step and Josh Jacobs took it to a step. Barkley doesn't have really a ton of leverage there. And so it wasn't too surprising that he ended up where he did. We'll see on Josh Jacobs. Jonathan Taylor does have leverage, and Jonathan Taylor is as high profile at the position. He was borderline MVP 2 years ago, and he was hurt last year. And he's got the owner who's saying what all the other ones don't want to, probably. And now you've got this weird standoff where, you've got team staff saying he can't pass physical, which would mean he doesn't have to get paid. And he's saying, I never said my back hurt. Like, it's getting messy, and he wants a trade. He demanded a trade over the weekend. I suspect they'll trade him because I think they can get a decent trade for him. As running backs don't have, the big time trade value, he probably does. He's not quite to Christian McCaffrey, but he's pretty close, I think. And he's young and he's cheap this year. And, he's young enough that you could justify, a small window extension for him, I think, if he's healthy. But it's a mess. And it's not going to get better. Like, this is not the only time we're going to see this. Like, it's going to intensify and it's going to get worse. And the NFL cannot wait until the next CBA to figure something out with these running backs, or you're just going to have, you're going to have to deal with this all the time if you're the NFL, if you don't figure out a way to get out ahead of it. And I get it. Like, you did a CBA. That's fine. But everybody in the world looks at this and is like, man, this sucks. This isn't right. It doesn't feel like that it would be that difficult to figure something out. Now, the owners may not want to do it, but at the same time, as they see this with Jim Irsay, it's like, do we really want to deal with that, though? Like, I don't know, man. Something will change. I would bet you this. Within 2 years, something will change fundamentally with the way running backs are paid.
Well, and also find another owner and running back combination that, this was going to happen to outside of the Colts. You've got Jonathan Taylor, who's super high profile. You've got Jim Irsay, who says whatever he wants. And it's usually entertaining. And sometimes you're like, Jim, what are you doing, man? Like, what are you saying?
This guy made the comment Jeff Saturday a year.
Right. Made the comment that, if he died and if Jonathan Taylor was no longer in the league would move on. And that's true. Like that. I mean, he said that's the honest truth, but that's probably not something that you say publicly. Making the comment that if, your star running back who almost won the MVP a couple of years ago wasn't there, the league would just move on. I mean, at that point, Jonathan Taylor's like, do you value me at all? Like, am I even on your radar as being of value and of need to your organization? So I can imagine that the GM, Chris Ballard, I can imagine that the coaching staff, I can imagine that everybody else, around, like on the team level, was like, Jim, buddy, what are you doing? Like, why are you saying that? Because now you've got this standoff, and, Jonathan Taylor saying that he wants to be traded, and Jim Irsay saying we're not going to trade him. And then they're going to put him on the injured list. And then he said he's never injured. And I mean, it's a mess, and it's going to continue to be a mess.
And it's a team that with him and their young quarterback now, like at the point where you consider Richardson starting and Taylor healthy with a read option, that's pretty dynamic. Like, the Colts in a winnable division here are missing their best player. Like,
and don't you think that Richardson has
he's their best player,
right? Richardson has a better chance of being a star in the league when he's got the star running back next to him, especially in year number one, right? Like, it takes a little bit of pressure off of him to do it all. I mean, I would hope that they can resolve all of this, but that's the thing, is that I don't know. You said that Jonathan Taylor has leverage, and he does to an extent, because I still don't know if there are a lot of other teams in the league that are going to be willing to acquire him for the value that he thinks he has. That's the issue with running backs right now, right? So I think both sides would feel like they've got some leverage here. I just hope it gets all figured out before the start of the season.
It's not that I think he has leverage in the trade. It's that I think he has leverage in general because he's young enough and valuable enough that if he can figure out a way to make this year count toward free agency, he actually has a chance to be pretty valuable on the open market. Like Miles Sanders was the highest paid running back on the open market this year, and it wasn't for very much. It was like, I think, $6.5 million a year. Jonathan Taylor, at his age and his ability, if healthy, has far more value than that. True impact player, right? That's his leverage. He's young enough. He does happen to be rehabbing an injury too, by the way. Like if he can get to free agency by whatever happens this year, his leverage is I still have value after this year. Like, I'm not old at all. I've got a lot of tread on the tires. And when it comes time, I'll have value on the open market. I just won't play this year. And so if he, again, like the challenge will be, and the Colts are already going down this road. That's why you're seeing this back pain. And he's saying, I don't have back pain, because they're trying to figure out a way, I think, to not have that happen, right? To not let him get a year of, I don't really call it service time in the NFL like they do baseball, but you know what I'm saying? Like to get to that spot where he can just go be a free agent. That's where it'll get complicated and messy and ugly. But I do think of all the running backs we've seen disgruntled right now, Taylor has the most leverage, the most real leverage that there is. The Colts don't have a lot behind him. They, if they don't do something, and I guess this is sort of, a big moment in the NFL for running backs. Like if replacement value comes in and the Colts are able to run the ball effectively, these running backs are going to lose all their momentum and leverage.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's got to be a weird dynamic in that room. Like it's got to be strange feeling.
Behind Jonathan Taylor, you've got Zach Moss and Deion Coleman. Those are the running backs on the depth chart. I don't think you feel confident about any one of those. The other thing, too, is that I feel like if you have Jonathan Taylor in the backfield to start the season, you can ease in Anthony Richardson a little bit. Gardner Minshew is there as the starting quarterback right now until, they name Anthony Richardson the guy. But if you don't have Taylor, you got to go with Richardson, I think, from the start, because you want to have your team be out there with Gardner Minshew, Zach Moss, and Deion Coleman? I don't think so.
I don't know what's going to happen, but something's going to happen different. Like he's not just going to play. I think at this point, I think we've crossed that bridge. So the question becomes, can he get the year of service time and just become a free agent? Because I think he would do it. Like if he can become a free agent in the offseason and just not play for the Colts this year somehow, I think he'll try to do it. I think the Colts, if that scenario exists, like if you're the Colts, get something for him because he ain't coming back. Like that's the reality of the situation. Irsay, you made that very clear. Like this ain't going to work. So go get a third-round pick for him. Like nobody, and we're not going to, if Jim Irsay trades him and they get a third-round pick, anybody going to say that the Colts caved there? No. I mean, I don't think so. That's just the situation itself. I think there's a lot of people that would think, oh, good for them. They got an extra third-round pick. 869-1240. Let's stick with the NFL. We'll hear from Andy Reid a little bit on the grueling nature of training camp. He sat down with Mitch Holthus, and we've got some of that by way of Steve and Ted. So Jad will have that for us when we come back. Travis Kelce throwing hands a little bit at practice. It's hot. I get it. But he didn't like it in the aftermath. We'll talk about it all. Little Chiefs training camp for you when we return on Sports Day.
Commercials are over.
Yo, I haven't got all day.
869-1240.
Time to get busy.
This is Sports Daily on KFH.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily. All right. Chiefs. Kelsey's throwing blows out there. It's hot. Kelsey says after he threw, it was with his left, at Jack Cochran, a backup linebacker who was trying to just, rip one away. He was shoving around a little bit a day earlier. Kelsey says, got to be a better teammate, got to be a better leader, plain and simple. I don't care, Tommy. I mean, training camp, shoving, pushing, fighting. I get it. You're like in the Chiefs situation. It's hot. You're in a dorm room. Like, it's going to be miserable out there. I would hate this time of year if I was an NFL, especially an NFL veteran, right? Because you're like, God, I don't need to be here. And this sucks. And like, I'm living this like Hollywood lifestyle. And I'm a Hall of Fame player and I got to come out here and sweat it out. And here's this scrub trying to like strip one away and impress the coaches. Like, get off me, dude. Like, I get it, but he owned it as he should. And, it's just that time of year, I think. And Andy Reid says, don't do it. You get hurt and everything else, but he gets it. I mean, this is no big deal.
Yeah. I don't have an issue with it at all. It's going to get chippy in training camp. I feel like you're getting these guys into the mindset of basically warfare, right? Like that's what it comes down to when you get into the regular season and, it's hot out there. I'm sure that guys like Travis Kelce, who have been around as long as he has, are like, man, I got to keep doing this every single July, August, like it's hot. And then I've got these guys that are backups that are, trying to punch the ball out and they're getting chippy with me. And then I'm trying to fight back. It is what it is. I did think that Kelce owned it pretty well. When it was all said and done. Really, I think the biggest thing, and there have been a couple of situations like this throughout training camp, it's gotten chippy with Patrick Mahomes, or he's been in the middle as trying to break up some things. And I'm just like, man, like, don't get him hurt. Like, I understand chippiness. I understand competitiveness, all of that. But let's just avoid any other injuries as we get closer to the season.
If one of these fights ever led to an injury, it'd be a big problem. And I don't remember that ever happening. That's the one thing where you're like, and Travis Kelce throwing one punch is a good, but if it leads to a scuffle and then somebody,
right,
it gets hurt,
they get their hand stepped on, or they get, I don't know.
Yeah. Mike, by the way, chimes in on the video stream with a well-placed timing. Not getting the girl's phone number didn't help either. Travis Kelce famously just totally shot down while trying to share phone numbers with Taylor Swift, which was a funny story. Yeah, that probably didn't help, Mike. It's probably a little frustration boiled over. Speaking of the frustration, just a time of year. So we mentioned this before the break. Steve and Ted getting some audio from an interview with Mitch Holthus is right. It was Mitch Holthus sitting down with Andy Reid, correct? So this is probably audio you haven't heard. This wasn't a part of like daily press briefings. Jad, do I have that correct? This was more of an exclusive one-on-one between Mitch and Andy. Okay. So Steve and Ted are going to get some of this. We're going to play it for you as we get it. Jad will cut that out. So here's Andy Reid with Mitch Holthus and talking about just the grueling nature of this part of the year.
There's a physical part of it. There's a mental part, getting through camp, knowing the plays. When you're tired, you've got 10 installs basically, and you've got to, you have to master those. That's both sides of the ball. So you got to stay sharp when you're tired, physically beat up. You're building a foundation really for January and hopefully February. And so at the latter quarter of the season, into the playoffs, if you're lucky enough to get there, then you've got this foundation that you can bank on. And then the early part of the season, when it's hot, you're going to be in good enough condition where you can get through those games. You're not worried about being hot and tired. You're going to be able to work through it and play your best game and give you an opportunity to do what you do best at playing.
I love, Tommy, that Andy Reid still has that old school nature in him. Because, by the way, I believe it. I think it's true. I think that, this time of year, it was always interesting when you'd have everybody going to pretty much like the most beautiful weather they could for training camp. And I suppose I get that from a fan's perspective and making a spectacle. But the reality is, like, for the team, it is kind of better to acclimate to the elements as quickly as you can. Like, it's hot in the NFL season for really the first 6 to 8 games of the year for a lot of these, for a lot of these teams. And it does sort of matter. You got to be careful in the heat, right? Like, there's a component of that too, but you practice in a dome all the time and then you go out to a 90-degree game. Why do you think Miami has such a home field advantage early in the season? Right, guy, that you just can't get used to it.
I mean, kind of the same way on the opposite side when you're playing in Green Bay in January, like that's really difficult to do. I mean, Andy Reid is known for putting on grueling training camps. That's just kind of what he's known for. And I like the thought of that. I like the conditioning part of that. I mentioned it, I think it was last week when we were talking about training camp. And I said, I feel like there are always going to be a handful of guys that show up to training camp not ready to go for the season. You've got guys like Patrick Mahomes that, he's training all year round. And I know that there are a lot of other players like that, but you've got the handful of players that are probably extremely talented, but they haven't really done anything during the off season. They vacationed, they've spent time with family, they've taken time off. I'm totally on board with that. I get it, but they may not be in the best conditioning shape and be ready to go for the regular season. That's what training camp is for, to get you back to game speed. There's a big difference between NFL training camp and Major League Baseball spring training. Those two things are completely different. They put spring training in, warmer locales because it's kind of a tourist destination, right? Like, people go and watch spring training and it's not really grueling, right? Like, you're just it's a different sport entirely. Training camp, at least for Kansas City, like, it is, full go all the time, battling the heat. And these guys are as competitive as you will see them during the entire year.
It's so funny too, because you'll see people like criticize that kind of stuff and Andy Reid and how long he plays players in the preseason and how grueling these. And you're like, guys, they've won 2 Super Bowls in the last little while here. Like, I think that at some point you have to get out there and play football. And it's uncomfortable, but it's okay. Like, that's just a part of it. And we don't think, and these things are far less grueling than they used to be through CBAs and everything else. But it's like, there's a reason for it. You think Andy Reid, like, I don't know how much you guys know about Andy Reid, but you think he wants to stand out there in that heat all day and sit there and sweat? No, like, he's not built for it, right? He's old. He loves cheeseburgers, like all that stuff. Like, I don't think he wants to be out there either, but he is, because it's important. And it is important. And Travis Kelce's fine. And there's no and I don't think, and let's be clear, I haven't heard anybody overreacting to Travis Kelce, by the way. It's just, it's out there. And it until we get into the preseason here in 14 days, is it August 13th? Mm-hmm. It's going to be, we're going to get these kinds of stories. And then you get to hit somebody else and everything's fine. And then it's like, but the other part of it is, as we've learned with Joe Burrow and a number of other guys, you just sort of hold your breath right now, right? Like, you just hold your breath. Can you make it through this first part of camp with no injuries, through the non-contact stuff? And then you're there. Like, and once you get to the preseason games, I feel like, because once the games are on, guys are going to get hurt. That's football. There's nothing you can do about it. It's the ones that are sort of non-contact this time of year where you're like, let's be careful. Yeah. It is different, though, Tommy, than when you have joint practices and teams fight each other.
Right. Those things happen.
It is. And they have really pulled back. There's not very many of those anymore. And that's probably a good idea. That's what you don't want to have happen, right? Like, that's far more than just a swing occasionally thrown at another guy.
And you got a guy like Jack Cochran, the one that was on the receiving end of the punch from Travis Kelce. He's trying to battle for a roster spot.
Didn't do anything wrong.
Right. He's trying to make an impression. Maybe didn't make the best one, but he's going up against the best tight end in the NFL. And so you're going to do everything that you can to stand out and make an impression so you can make the roster, because that's the other thing about training camp. When you're going full go and it's grueling and it's hard and competitive and all of that, keep in mind at the very end of all of it, you start to trim down the roster some, and you start looking at guys that, maybe didn't have a great training camp, or, maybe they weren't in very good, condition to be ready for it. or they weren't making plays. They didn't make an impression. You got to stand out a little bit, especially those fringe players that may or may not make the roster. And so we're getting closer to that point now too, where I think the conversation will start to begin about who's going to make the team and who's not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not as interested in that stuff most of the time, but I think there are positions where that's interesting this year, especially. So it is really the hardest part of training camp right now to me, because there is nothing we're going to see tangibly except for bad things, right? Maybe that's not true with the Chiefs and the wide receiver position. Maybe there are things we want to see work out in camp, but you really kind of just need to get to the games. Really just kind of need to get to the games, and then I'd rather see the wide receivers working there anyway, because they will need to work. Like, they're going to have to work, whether it's with Patrick Mahomes or whatever. Those 8 possessions we see out of Patrick Mahomes this preseason feel like they're pretty important, as important as things get for a team that's as experienced and, much of a winner as the Chiefs are. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll give something away. We'll probably give away some HTO on the other side of the break here. I do want to get into the Royals. Royals fans, hang in there. I know you're angry today because the Nicky Lopez trade makes absolutely no sense. Man, I'm with you. It didn't make any sense to me either. But we'll get into that. Look at some other deals happening at the Major League Baseball trade deadline as well, coming up in hour number 2. But get ready. We'll give away some HCO on the other side. Wrap up hour number 1. The IHOP hotline is open for you, 869-1240 at Sports Daily. Albracht and Castor. We'll be right back.
Okay, take it easy. We're going on the air.
This is Sports Daily on KFH.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily on KFH. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor here with you. Another hot one coming for you today. Let's help you cool off with some free iced tea at HTO, available to you West Wichita, 13th and Tyler, East Wichita, 21st and 127th, coming very soon in Derby. But these free tea cards will work either at Wichita East or West, which are open now and ready to see you. First caller to the IHOP hotline, 869-1240. More than 25 flavors of tea. You can get your hands on a couple of them. Take a friend and try it out. Or if you're a fan already, well, just get a couple free iced teas on us here at Sports Daily in KFH. Again, first caller, 869-1240, can get those free tea cards. Chad will handle that. Tommy, it's been busy across Major League Baseball with the trade deadline. It's beginning to pick up a little bit. But let's pause to the Royals part of this until we get into the next hour. So we've got just a little bit more time, but let's bird's eye look in the meantime here as we wrap up hour number one, the sort of the rest of the league. The Rangers have certainly been the most aggressive. They added Max Scherzer over the weekend. And then that was Saturday. And then yesterday they go get Jordan Montgomery to bolster the starting rotation. At this point, they're certainly not finished. As they, if you sort of go all in, you go all in. And so I would imagine they go get at least a couple of bullpen arms, and their offense has struggled lately too. So they may be looking for a bat. Very, very active. The Rangers right now, the most active. The Cardinals, probably the biggest sellers at this point. And the Angels have been very aggressive too. There's sort of tweener teams like the Mets. Like if you trade Scherzer, why don't you trade Verlander? Why not do that? It'll be interesting because I think we're going to see some very large names move here.
Yeah, I wonder how aggressive teams are really going to be in moving superstars. Like we've seen the Mets already move Max Scherzer. Will they move Justin Verlander? And will Verlander waive his no trade clause? I don't know. It probably depends on the team. I've heard the Dodgers are in on him. The Astros are in on him. And that would be kind of a fun reunion for Verlander to go back to Houston if he's willing to do that. The Cardinals are selling off left and right. And I wonder how likely they will be to trade away their superstars and Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt. I don't know. I don't know if they've got the appetite for that. The Padres are interesting. Will Blake Snell or Josh Hader be on the trade market? And then you've got teams like the Rangers, who have been probably the most aggressive team here before the trade deadline. Are there going to be other teams that are going to be try to be just as aggressive as they are? The Angels trying to keep pace with the Rangers. They traded for Randall Grichuk and CJ Cron from Colorado. So, I mean, it's going to be pretty active for the next 24 hours.
The Astros will be too. The AL West is where it's looking like we're going to get this arms race a little bit. The Astros have made some moves. The Angels are obviously all in now with Shohei Ohtani, and the Rangers will be too. For the Rangers and Scherzer, I got a lot of, because I'm a Rangers fan. I think people know that. And I got a lot of messages like, oh my God, they traded their third best prospect for Max Scherzer. You guys are crazy. And in the beginning, it's Ronald Acuna's brother, which makes it a little bit more high profile. But, anything I've read on him, he's really athletic and everything else. But, he profiles as a maybe everyday starter, maybe. But the reality is he's an infielder. And maybe you could have stuck him in the outfield, but he's totally blocked in Texas. And the interesting part about the Scherzer deal, Tommy, is, and this is why I think the Mets become interesting in all of this. The Mets ate all but $22 million this year and next year.
Right.
So the Rangers get a year and a half of Scherzer for $22 million in that trade. That's why they were willing to give up their third, and he's a top 50 prospect across baseball. Yeah. He's not that's a good return for the Mets. But to get a year and a half of Scherzer for $22 million when that would have cost the Mets almost $100 million. That's why the Rangers did that deal.
And the Rangers are banking on Scherzer being better than what he was in New York. He was not good for the Mets at all. And he's getting older.
He was good
His
or
fastball-
bad. He was never
Right.
average, right? Now, his peripherals are down, though. There's risk.
Yeah.
Like, he's not striking guys
His
out. He's walking
fastball
more
is
guys.
down.
But,
all of that.
He's either been good or bad. There hasn't been much in between. And with the bad that's perceived, he still has an ERA of 4 this year, which is the Rangers pitching right now is in rough shape. They've had a lot of injuries. Evaldi just went down. They're already missing DeGrom. They needed arms, and they got one. And I think it's fine. I think it's appropriate risk for the Rangers. But think about for the Mets here for a second, Tommy. And like, if you never thought there was a disparity between the haves and have-nots as far as finances in baseball, so here's what the Mets get to do now, right? They get to spend gobs of money on these free agents, okay? And then when they don't work out, they get to trade those free agents, eat a bunch of the money, and get big-time prospects to come back. So now they're just, like, they can retool the farm system like that. And they get to spend. That's how, the Dodgers and the Astros and all these teams that can spend. That's why it's so much easier for them. Because if it doesn't work, you just trade them, get something back, and then go after free agency again the next year. I found the Mets, I do this all day long. If money's not an issue,
why not?
Yes, that's how you retool quickly. And guess who doesn't get to do that? Small market teams. And the Royals are out here trading Nicky Lopez for bad relievers and a head scratcher. When was the last time the Royals did something that wasn't a head scratcher?
I don't know.
869-1240. Congratulations to Tom for winning the HTO. Again, available to you East or West. We're going to get into the Royals next. I don't know what to say. We'll talk about it right after this. More Sports Daily, hour number 2. Jake Albracht, Tommy Castor, Chad Chambers producing. We'll be right back.
This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome back in, everybody. It is Sports Daily on KFH. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor here with you on a Monday edition, taking stock of the weekend, looking ahead as we have a very interesting day in the sports world. Talked a lot about some of the training camp latest. That was sort of a broad look. We can get to anything else. The Chiefs apparently dealing with some weather up there today. We have not yet talked a lot about the Major League Baseball trade deadline, which we will do in this hour for sure. Some of the conference realignment out there for us. If we see anything there, we will certainly let you go. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor here in hour number 2. Jad Chambers producing. Let's talk the Royals here, Tommy. A curious move, Nicky Lopez for Taylor Hearn. And, you see it on the surface and you're like, well, all right. Hearn hasn't been very good. The Royals see him, he has a 14.73 in 5 outings with the Rangers and Braves. The Braves basically picked him up off the scrap heap. He got DFA'd, and the Braves pick him up, and the Royals think that, oh, man, he looks like he could be a good big lefty reliever out there. Let's go get him. They trade Nicky Lopez, and Lopez is interesting. He has dropped offensively, but he's handy. Fans kind of like him, and it's like, okay, all right. But it doesn't make the organization any better, the move, I don't think, which is what you want to see at the trade deadline. Doesn't make the future any brighter. And then you get a little more into it and you look around and, oh, lo and behold, they can save some money in this trade, right? Because Nicky Lopez is making more than Hearn. So if they swap salaries, they get to save a little bit of money here. And I don't know how you don't look at it as a cost-saving move. That's the last thing the Royals need to be interested in, is a cost-saving move. Good for Nicky Lopez that he gets to go to Atlanta. But, man, that one's just like what are we doing here?
Of course, full disclosure, I'm a Braves fan, so I think the trade is great. Like I'm on board with Nicky Lopez providing depth in the infield for the Braves down the stretch. I like that a lot. But no, this is a bad trade, and I don't really know any other way to say it. This is a bad trade for the Royals in a time where the fan base is just looking for anything, any shred of competence, any shred of competitiveness, whatever. They're not getting it. And man, if the trade deadline comes and goes, and this is the only deal that the Royals make, if they don't move Scott Barlow, if they don't move Carlos Hernandez, if they don't, though, I mean, they moved Aroldis Chapman, so they did do that earlier. But man, like that, what a terrible trade that is. The other thing too, the Royals could have traded for Taylor Hearn with the Rangers for cash like a week ago. Instead, they gave up Nicky Lopez to get Taylor Hearn from the Braves. That makes no sense to me. I mean, I know it's a cost-saving move, but when the Braves traded for Taylor Hearn a week ago, they traded him for cash. The Royals could have done the same thing and kept Nicky Lopez if they really wanted Taylor Hearn, which I don't know why you would. But man, like this, it's really hard to find any shred of like a silver lining in this trade at all. It's just overall bad for the Royals.
There is some rumors, I guess, coming out of Kansas City that Lopez had become not a locker room guy or something, which, man, I just don't know how much I buy that. And if Nicky Lopez isn't a good locker room guy based on the career he's had, then maybe the locker room has a problem, right? I just it is a strange time. And I don't know, one, where's the leadership off the field? We know where it is on the field, right? We know where the leadership is. And the problem with this is too, Tommy, like the Royals, and I don't mean this tongue in cheek. It's just reality. Finally got their first 3-game win streak of the year.
Yeah.
You had Bobby Witt Jr. with a walk-off grand slam. You've got, okay, all right. We were talking this weekend, you and I at an event, like they're still drawing decent crowds and these things. But then you make a move like this, and it's like, man, that's not a baseball move. Like nobody's going to look at that and be like, that's a good baseball move, right? Like,
Right.
It looks like a cost-saving move. And here we go again. We're talking about stadiums and cost-saving. Like at what point do the Royals make a baseball decision, right? Like it's time to make some baseball decisions. And Aroldis Chapman's return was fine. I was happy with that one. That was that's a fringe starter that definitely has a chance to get better. I got that, understood it, made sense. They will trade Barlow. If they don't trade Barlow, run him out of town. They should have traded him 2 years ago.
Yeah.
They'll trade Barlow. I think they'll trade Hernandez. It's too much of a seller's market not to do that. So that will happen.
But I think you got to temper your expectations on what the return is going to be for those guys, right?
And that's my biggest problem. Like, what?
There's nothing that has happened
Nicky
so far.
Lopez to get Taylor Hearn,
right? And to me, doesn't that tell you that? Like, I don't know how JJ Piccolo is handling negotiations. If he's the worst negotiator on the planet, I don't know. But because of that trade that happened yesterday with Nicky Lopez, that gives me zero faith that the Royals are going to be able to get anything of significance in return for Barlow or Hernandez.
Well, all the industry is telling you right now through national reporters that it is a seller's market and teams are asking for a lot. So we'll see if the Royals hold to that. Barlow, Hernandez, very handy players right now that just about any team, any contender, right, could get use out of those guys. And so you have to take advantage of it. There's never been a better time to be bad than this year, right? Like this is as good a time to be bad as we've ever seen because the extra wild card makes all these extra players, valuable and viable and all of this stuff. And you have got to, when you have some assets like they do, and Barlow's fringy, right? He's got a bad ERA. He's sort of been hit or miss, but I think there's enough of a track record there that he's still got some value, right? But he's been sort of all or nothing here. In July, and we talked about him having a nice June, a pretty nice June. But in July, let's be fair, he's given up runs in at least 2 in 3 of his last 5 appearances. So that's not good. But he's got some value. We've known he can do something in this league. They should have traded him 2 years ago. Let's look at Carlos Hernandez lately here. Carlos Hernandez, sneakily, Tommy, has become the most valuable piece probably. He's had 4 straight scoreless. Before that, he gave up a run. And that's 4 straight. So I'm just looking now at game logs. So since June 12th, Tommy, against the Reds, he has made, let me do some quick math, 12, 15, 18, 19 appearances. He's made 19 appearances since June 12th, okay? He has given up 1 run in 3 of those 19 appearances. His ERA is down to 3.50, basically. He's not really allowing a lot of base runners in that stretch either, Tommy. So 19 appearances and you allow to run 3 times. Hernandez is the piece.
Yeah.
And maybe you amplify, maybe you don't have to trade them separately. Maybe you put them together and can get that extra piece out of out of somebody's system. Like you got to get creative here because I do maintain like Barlow's been rocky, but there's enough there, I think, over time with Barlow to think he could be a change of scenery guy. Like Hearn's not a change of scenery guy. Barlow is a change of scenery guy.
Yeah,
probably. And package him with Hernandez or trade him separately. Hernandez, look, I would imagine of the names being mentioned, if you looked across baseball track record for track record, there's probably not a lot of better, right? Just statistically or just, by the meat and potatoes of it, guys, than Carlos Hernandez. And oh, by the way, he's shown over time he could be a spot starter for you too.
So here's the thing that I go back to with the bullpen for Kansas City and those two pieces that, by all accounts, everybody believes are going to be traded. John Heyman, Baseball Insider, MLB Network, tweeted about 45 minutes ago that the Atlanta Braves are looking for pitching, including back-end bullpen help. The Braves just worked with the Royals and didn't end up with Hernandez or Barlow. They traded for Nicky Lopez. So what does that tell you? Does that tell you that the Braves aren't interested in those guys? The Braves need bullpen help. Or do you think that the negotiations went so poorly that for whatever reason, I don't know if JJ Piccolo settled on Taylor Hearn in return for Nicky Lopez, and maybe the conversation had started with the bullpen guys. I don't know. But that was you would think, a prime opportunity for the Royals to get some good prospects in return for those two relievers with the team that you're talking to about Nicky Lopez. I don't know why the trigger wasn't pulled, and it still could be. Maybe they are still talking. I don't know, or maybe they're talking with other teams.
Well,
but I feel like that's a missed opportunity.
Don't you hope that it means that they're asking too much? Because I want them to ask too much now,
sure,
right? Like ask too much on July 31st, but then take your best offer. And I don't think there's urgency to like, oh, well, these teams are going to go find somebody else. Yeah, they haven't yet. Like, don't lose this game of chicken. You've got at least one piece that just about every contender needs, if not two or 1.5, right? So yeah, play chicken. Hold on, sit tight, wait, make them overpay, right? That's the goal. If you're in a seller's market, you have to make teams overpay. Now, what is overpaying for, relievers with, what? Probably not much, but it's something, right? The Royals are so thin in the farm system. Like they just have got to retool it. And I don't think they're going to go get anybody's top, 4 or 5 prospect. But I think if you're the Royals right now, you can sit there and say, we want a top 5 prospect in your system. That's what we want. And you hold to that until hopefully some team gets desperate enough. They're like, all right, fine, do it. Let's just get it over with. We got to have it. We think we can win the World Series. There are teams out there right now that have already showed us they are desperate, right? The Angels might be the most desperate team. And I don't know what the state of the Angels bullpen is off the top of my head. The Rangers are pretty desperate, right? They've shown us that because they're going and being aggressive now. They're telling you that they're willing to go all in here. We'll see. The Royals, it comes down to like how much faith do you have that they'll get it right? I think that they got appropriate value for Oldest Chapman. I was fine with that trade. And then the Nicky Lopez trade made absolutely no sense to me, other than they had a chance to save a little bit of money, which is not the optics the Royals need right now. So do I have faith they can get it? This is, I don't have any faith, and this is no offense or anything else. Like Quatraro, maybe they're growing pains, but clearly the team is worse than it was a year ago. Like, I don't think there's any doubt about that. We're at least seeing Bobby Witt develop, but I don't really have a take yet on Piccolo. We'll find out after this trade deadline. And what I said that because you've been ready to make wholesale changes, but I said, well, let's at least see what he does at the trade deadline. The clock's ticking. Like, let's see it. The Nicky Lopez trade makes no sense to me. I don't think, or anybody else. The Oldest Chapman trade, I thought that was a good one. So we'll see. We'll see how this pans out. About, a little more than 24 plus 7, about 30 hours left before the trade deadline. And we're going to see moves made. The Royals better get in on it.
Yeah. And I want to give some credit where credit is due. And really the only bright spot has been Bobby Witt Jr. Over the last few days or so. Of course,
he's been
the Royals
lately.
Yeah. They swept over the weekend. But Bobby Witt Jr. in 2 games over the weekend had 8 hits, 9 RBIs, and multiple home runs. And he's only the second Royals player to ever do that. You have to go all the way back to 1969. And a guy by the name of Ed Kirkpatrick was the last guy who had that kind of 2-game span like Bobby Witt Jr. had. The walk-off grand slam was insane. Like, I feel like that's about the only thing right now that you can really hang your hat on if you're a Royals fan and really get excited about, because the more that he develops, the more that he grows, the more that I feel like if there was a competent front office around him, that you could bring in players to come around Bobby Witt Jr. and they could all be successful and ultimately make Bobby Witt Jr. even better than what he is right now.
He's been very good lately. It's hard. I'm trying to find like and I don't think you can do this. It's too difficult. To find like the war over the last month or so. But either way, he's been great lately. He's been one of the better players in baseball lately. And his development has been great. Ken points out that Ryan Yarbrough, that's another bright spot. Ryan Yarbrough's been really good.
Yeah.
And Quatraro's has pointed to Yarbrough. Yarbrough's, I don't know what the overall feel for Yarbrough is, but I mean, we'll take anything at this point, right? Like we're excited about anything. Yarbrough is 31 years old though. And he's put together a couple of good starts. How many good starts does he have? He has three of his last 4 starts have been good, right? And one was not very good. It was fine. 3 earned runs and 5 2/3, I suppose you'll take. And then so you go since May 7th, when they put it, is that the first start he made? I believe it is. I believe his first start came then. He's been, he's dropped his ERA down 2 full runs. He's gone at least 5 2/3. All of those were 1-run starts, except for the one I mentioned there, 3 earned. He's been all right, but he's 31 years old. So good for Ryan Yarbrough. I'm happy for Ryan Yarbrough. I'm not sure that, I'm ready to circle the wagons around Ryan Yarbrough just yet, but I'll take anything at this point. But it's the Bobby Witt Jr. year, and it's another year of his development. And we just need them to do well at the deadline to continue, because let's be real too, like the feeling around the team, as bad as they've been, has been better, right? And it's all because of Bobby Witt Jr., right? That's all it's taken for us to feel just a little bit better. It's like, okay, Bobby Witt Jr. looks really good.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. But now you got to win the deadline. Like you got to win at the deadline. It's a seller's market. There aren't very many sellers. It's pretty hard to lose at the deadline, I would think, this year, right? Like it will be hard to come out of the deadline being like, man, we got fleeced this year if you're a seller. The Royals are a seller. They've made one good trade and one that makes absolutely no sense to anybody. Okay. You got about a day and a half here to go and trade as much as you can. And there's probably more, because I didn't see Nicky Lopez getting traded. There's probably more than Hernandez and Barlow, and that's probably a part of it too. But at least Hernandez needs to get a good return. There's not going to be many guys better than him, at least based on performance, right? There are plenty of pitchers that throw harder and do that kind of stuff, but the proof is in the pudding with Hernandez this year. He's been really good out of the pen. You got to go capitalize on that when everybody needs bullpen help.
And when I say that Bobby Witt Jr. is the only player that you can really hang your hat on if you're a Royals fan, I mean, from a Stars perspective, Ryan Yarbrough.
Well, when you look to the future's perspective, I think is
Michael Massey has been pretty good over the last couple of weeks. So there are some slightly bright spots. Carlos Hernandez is one of them too in the bullpen. But yeah, I mean, as far as a building block, a foundation to build the team around, clearly Bobby Witt Jr. And so I'm with you. Winning the deadline, and even just the optics around winning the deadline, it's so crucial for the Royals. Even if they come out and, and I don't even know how you do this. If you try to win the PR battle in it, and you're trading away these relievers, and I don't know how you shift the narrative to make it seem like you're really, playing hardball and trying to get the best return for these guys. They got to win the deadline. They got to have the fan base look and say, okay, they at least did something to try to set this franchise up to be in a little bit of a better spot next season and beyond than they are right now.
And win the deadline is a relative term. Win the deadline means you just made trades that make sense, right? That trade made sense. The Nicky Lopez trade, I can't make sense of it. That's my problem now. I don't mind trading Nicky Lopez, and I like Nicky Lopez. I think he's a handy player in I feel like, the baseball nerds, Tommy, and I always need to preface, I mean that by like real stats-driven baseball people are never going to like Nicky Lopez. But if you watch baseball and you're a little more old school, like, you know who to love Nicky Lopez? Ned Yost, right? Like Ned
Oh,
Yost
for
would
sure.
love Nicky Lopez, I think. So, but that has value, and it has value when he's not an everyday starter. And I think there was a time where he looked like maybe he would be an everyday starter. I don't think that's the case anymore. But for a team like the Braves, where if you have any kind of injury, you'll be fine defensively, and you'll have a guy that can handle himself at the plate, that will be okay. Is Vinny Pasquantino toast? We're being asked on the video stream. I don't think so. Not that I've heard. I think he's fine. He's got to go
Yeah, I
undergo
mean,
shoulder
obviously,
surgery is
yeah,
always a
shoulder
little
surgery for
frightening,
sure.
but he'll be all right starting next year. He should be ready to go next year. I mean, you haven't heard
Yeah,
anything about like
no,
that, have you,
I
Tommy?
think he's. I mean, clearly season ending, right? And you're going to have some
yes.
rehab in that, and it's a torn labrum, and but I mean, players come back from that sort of thing all the time. So, hopefully ready to go by the start of the year, because you and I have said before that outside of Bobby Witt Jr., Vinny Pasquantino may be the only other position player, at least, that you feel like could be
Yeah, you're talking
a
about
solid
linchpin
contributor
anchors there,
for sure.
right?
Yeah,
Like guys to that will be the guys that are on the tickets, right? The guys that are banners are hanging up around the stadium and that kind
yeah.
of thing. Yeah, those are the two guys. No, I think Vinny Pasquantino, nothing's changed, at least as far as what I've seen. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back. More Sports Daily. Let's just have our wish list for the Big 12 as everything appears to be on the table in conference realignment. What is a best case scenario? What would we prefer? Not what do we think's going to happen or anything like that. Like, what's a best, coolest, strongest case scenario for the league? We'll get into that as we look around that world as we make our way through this Monday edition of Sports Daily. It's Albracht and Castor. On the way out here, Chad, let's give away some WindSurge vouchers. Tommy and I were at a WindSurge game, the Odyssey event here with our coworkers. A lot of fun. If you want to get out there to see a game of your choice, we'll give away 4 vouchers right now at 869-1240 to our first caller, courtesy of us here at Sports Daily and KFH. We'll send you to a WindSurge game of your choice. 4 vouchers for the first caller at 869-1240. On our way out, we'll come back. Conference realignment talk next on Sports Daily. right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily here. Let's talk conference realignments. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor here on this Monday edition. It is a crazy time because you get lots of rumors, lots of insiders, lots of people on social media. There's people that are probably too defensive and not just more like there's actual information that I've heard, blah, blah, blah. The Big 12 we know is added Colorado. It certainly seems like panic has set in the Pac-12. I don't think the media deal is there. Haven't thought it. I think their best play may honestly be to wait a little while, but I don't think teams are going to want to do that. So the Pac-12 is in big trouble here. If you're the Big 12, Tommy, and we have all of the different rumors that have been out there, what do you think is the best case scenario for the Big 12? Is it Oregon and Washington, even though Brett McMurphy pointed out over the weekend, who's been all over this? It's sort of like, yeah, you can add them, but as soon as the Big 10 comes calling, they're going to leave, which I get that, right? So, is it those teams plus Arizona? Is UConn in the mix? Like, do you wait for the ACC? What is a best case scenario for you for the Big 12 as we move forward here?
Well, it's kind of a non-answer to your question. I think they're already there. I mean, honestly, wherever you go from here on out, you are adding strength to a conference that there have been questions for a long time about how stable they would be long-term. And those questions are largely gone now. So I don't want to say that it's all gravy because you've got teams that are clearly more valuable than others that are still potentially out there, universities, more valuable than others. I think Arizona, in my mind, I said it earlier, I think they are the next to go. And I think that they are a really good fit for the Big 12. You've got an opportunity to have, Tucson is a great college town. And I've even heard people on social media talking about you could have a rivalry between Arizona and Texas Tech and Tucson and Lubbock and, not that far away from each other, potentially being on the table. And then you've got, they're a big basketball school for sure, a heritage basketball program, adding to the already, large basketball prestige in the Big 12 would be beneficial also. So I think Arizona is the next to go. I like Oregon and Washington. I like their profiles. But yeah, I mean, Brett McMurphy is onto something where he says that, the Big 10, as soon as they come calling, and they probably will come calling at some point for Oregon and Washington, they're probably going to jump ship. So maybe in the short term, that's great. I don't know what that looks like long term. I would be content with Arizona, and then you call it good.
So Tucson to Lubbock, by the way, is just a quick look, is 10 hours. So I don't know what that rivalry would be.
Not that far.
It's an easy flight. Phoenix,
yeah.
That's the thing. That's why I like Arizona. Like geographically, it's great. I think that, their football profile would raise in the Big 12. Their basketball doesn't need to, but it's a place people would want to go, right? Like there's no doubt about that. Arizona for sure is in for me. I don't know how to handle Oregon and Washington. I don't know how you handle the Big 10 component of that. And I don't know if you're Oregon and Washington, what you do here. They're sort of like San Diego State was to the Mountain West, where it's like, yeah, we want to go. We don't really have an option now, so we're just going to hang tight. Oregon and Washington will eventually land somewhere, right? Like they're not in danger like Oregon State or Washington State of not landing anywhere. They'll have a home somewhere. And in the short term, even if it's in the Pac-12 with a bad buyout or whatever, they're going to have a place. Like if you're Oregon, and really Washington probably deserves to, you say this too, because they've been in the CFP, like they're going to be able to get into the CFP playing out of the Pac-12.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure their best option isn't to wait for the Big 10 if they have any indication the Big 10 is interested. That's what I don't know about the Big 12. I mean, I'd love to have them too. Would I love to have them only in the short term? The only reason I think that there's risk in that is that if they join the Big 12 and then left for the Big 10, that's a perceived weakness now, right? Like you've now perceived weakness that you're getting poached again. I don't know that the Big 12 ever wants to be in the business of being poached again. So can you get Oregon and Washington? Can you convince them that, listen, here's what we're doing? And as I said last week, this isn't about the current TV deal, which is good, right? It's fine. It's about the next TV deal in 4 or 5 years from now. Or what is it, 5 or 6 years from now? That's where we really think we're going to be able to capitalize. And is the Big 12 going to be the third best league when the dust settles on this? When the ACC ultimately gets poached, right? Is the Big 12 going to be in a position here to be in there? Or if you're Oregon and Washington, do you say, I don't know what assurances you can get. I just don't know. And there's obvious risk in adding them. And so I'm not sure that what the best answer is there.
I mean, I think on paper, Oregon and Washington, like it works on paper, but I mean, I think there are too many unknowns. And, if they've got that desire to go to the Big Ten, that's pretty risky on the part of Brett Yormark. And while Yormark has been very aggressive, he also has not taken big time risks either. Like, he's been very strategic in the moves that he's made. And so I'm not sure that Oregon and Washington, knowing that risk exists, would really be the best bet for them.
Well, it's impossible unless you have part of the conversations. It's just impossible to know. And I don't think you can negotiate different buyouts for different schools. I don't think you can do that. So you have to, it's just, there's a lot of risk there, but there's upside too, because here's the reality. I don't know when the Big Ten would like to expand. My guess is it would be closer to when they think they can also go after ACC schools. So let's say it's 3 years from now at minimum. Let's say you add Washington and Oregon, and you've got them for 3 years at least, right? If you could get that, I do think there could be value in increasing that brand, increasing that league, and getting closer to that next renegotiation window, right? Because at that point, you think if your brand is, and I think this is the goal for Yormark. I think he's trying to get closer to the other two with the next deal. And so if they come in and it's all fine and dandy and you're sitting here, maybe there isn't a need at that point to leave because you're in a great place. And so that's a part of it too. Like, how quickly, like if you guys are going to leave, how quickly is that going to happen? And I don't know how you guess that if you're the Big 12, because at any point the Big 10 could expand it, right? But it's like, I don't know what their rules are on expansion with this new deal that they've done. Can they, like the Big 12, just add members that get full value? That's something to consider too. I don't know the answer to that. That's not a hypothetical question. That's a real question. I have no idea. I know it's that way in the Big 12. I think if you think you can have them for at least 3 or 4 years, you probably do it if you can, because it will help you down the road. Because at that point too, at some point the ACC is going to get poached, and if they're in there, then you can start to shop around there just a little bit. And there is some perception that it will end up being the ACC versus the Big 12 as who's going to become that third. Well, the Big 12 right now has an opportunity to get stronger. The ACC, I don't think, can really do anything right now. So take advantage if you can. Here's a school I think that would be a shoe-in, no doubt about it. We got to get this school, is Utah. Utah is a team, I would be aggressive with Utah. And they've been pretty steadfast. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's because they were, non-Power 5 for so long, and then they finally get into the Pac-12. I don't know what it is about the resistance there, but Utah makes so dang much sense to me as far as like fitting the vibe of the Big 12. Utah fits it, right? Like it fits.
But hasn't Utah been very vocal in their support of the Pac-12?
Yes.
That's the difference between like in Arizona and in Utah. Arizona's been very diplomatic.
Bygones here. Like, who cares?
I just don't know. I'm not saying that the Big 12 doesn't pursue them because of the words they've used. I'm just saying I think it's legitimate that Utah's like, we don't want to do the Big 12, and I don't know. Well, I don't know. I mean, really, what's the other option? Like, hang on in the Pac-12,
right?
And I mean, because really, at the end of the day, the Pac-12 is probably going to end up as a glorified version of the Mountain West, right? Like, you're going to have Fresno State and Boise State and, alongside Washington State and Oregon State and Stanford and Cal. By the way, think about how big of a cliff Stanford has fallen off from. And I know that there are so many other things that are important at Stanford outside of athletics, but it wasn't that long ago that Jim Harbaugh is the coach at Stanford and they're in the national spotlight. And now it's like nobody wants them, like they're on that same level as Cal and Washington State and Oregon State. Like it's kind of interesting.
I would tell you that I would take Stanford, just by the way. if I had like a wish list of things that could matter for the Big 12, I would take Stanford. I would take Utah. I would actually take UConn, by the way. And I know that a lot of Big 12, like, diehard writers and forever beat writers have been anti-UConn. I would actually take UConn, and I would incur the risk. One, I would try to take them as a less expensive member. And then at the next negotiation, if they can get their football program up to snuff, maybe they become but I want UConn basketball. I want everything about UConn basketball. And by the way, if you're UConn, the difference in being a partial paid member, like you don't get as much as everybody else versus the Big East, is still better, right? And they can always go back, right? We know that now.
Yeah.
They can, and if the Big East doesn't want them, they can go back to the American, they can go back to the Atlantic 10, they can go back wherever they want.
I mentioned this to you over the weekend. And I know I think you kind of shot it down when I texted it to you, but man, I think that if I'm the Pac-12 and if I'm the ACC, why not merge at this point?
You do.
I mean, like, why not have these phone calls? Because the ACC is going to get poached. The Pac-12 has already been poached, and the Big 12 is not going anywhere. Why not join forces together and be like, look, for our own survivals, like, let's just come together. And you know what? The last couple of years, there have been these like, ridiculous fake alliances,
scheduling
that literally
alliances.
They mean nothing.
How'd that work out for the Pac-12 and Big 10?
It means not like, I'm not talking about a fake stupid alliance. I'm talking about let's merge, let's save ourselves and come together. We can have a coast to coast conference. I don't know why why that's not
what
in
the
the discussion.
Pac-12 should have done with the Big 12, by the way.
Absolutely.
It won't happen because they're both thinking about their own survival, right? Like, they're not thinking about a collective survival. And the ACC, by the way, probably and rightfully so, feels like when we get a chance to expand, we're going to have a chance to be just like the Big 12 and go get better, right? The Pac-12 doesn't feel that way right now to me. So the ACC is stuck in this waiting game to some degree. I agree with you. That is the best answer for those two leagues to do that. I just don't think they're going to. There's nothing historically now with several opportunities for leagues to do this that would tell you they would do it. The Big 12, I don't think would want that right now. I mean, I don't think I would want an all-out merger anymore if I'm the Big 12. I would rather poach the teams that I want. And I think Arizona and Utah are there. I would take Arizona. I would take Utah. I would take Washington. I would take Oregon. I think Stanford still fits. I don't know enough about Arizona State. I don't think so. And I would take UConn as a less than full member, just because I want that basketball brand and I want that geographic region on the table here. And then when time comes for the ACC, having UConn, having West Virginia, having Cincinnati makes a little more sense if you want to go just a little bit more east. Hey, Pitt. What do you do in Pitt? You want to renew that rivalry with West Virginia? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
where's Memphis at? I mean, Memphis could be another possibility where you've got a profile there that might work.
I don't know why the Big 12 didn't go after Memphis the first time. Memphis is going to have an opportunity. Memphis, here's a prediction for you. Memphis will play in the Pac-12, right, alongside SMU at some point. That's not based on anything other than, for whatever reason, I don't think the Big 12 wants Memphis because they could have had them the first time and they didn't take them. Now, that was before. No, that wasn't before Yormark, or was it? That was before Yormark. Yeah. So maybe he sees the value in their basketball program, and their football program's been pretty good. But I think you still shoot big here, and people get worried about too many teams. I'd take 20. I think you can take 24 because you can just split it 12 and 12, 10 and 10. You don't have to play the other side. I mean, you could play one or two teams from the other side, maybe, but you just play conference championship game. In basketball, you don't get to play round robin, unfortunately. That's okay. Like, I don't think there's any issue with going 20 to 24 because you can split it in half and just basically have two leagues. Like, go for that because it lets you play games all over the radar. TVs, like, if I'm a TV executive and I get that many options at games in different windows, that's inventory, man. Like, that's okay to me. You got to make it worth my time. Like, I don't want, no offense to Oregon State, Washington State, but if you're giving me late night windows that feature Stanford games or, Arizona, that has value. That for sure has value. Oregon and Washington certainly would. It's a time for the Big 12 to be aggressive. Big 12's in a position of power here, maybe even more than we thought they were. I think they're even in a better position than we would have said they could have been in a month ago. And here we go. Like, all the rumors are out there now. Colorado, were they the domino? We'll find out. I think in the next 2 weeks, maybe even sooner than that. 869-1240. Congratulations to Kevin, who will check out a little Wind Surge baseball, courtesy of us here at Sports Daily. It's Albracht and Castor, Jet Chambers producing. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. Sports Daily trade deadline coming. Justin Verlander, another big name, maybe on the block, says, quote, I think it largely depends on how the organization views next year. I think trading Max was a tough sign. Trying to look back at it, it happened this year, committed to win a championship here. But if the organization decides that that's not the direction they think is the best fit, then yeah, he'd be more open to it. Verlander's going to get traded. He's been better than Scherzer through 95 innings this year. I think you go right back to the well if you're the Rangers, right? Like there are a lot of teams that would be interested in Verlander. He's going to get moved, don't you think, Tommy? Like he's going to be gone.
Yeah, and it sounds like the Dodgers are probably the big fit for Justin Verlander. The Mets need pitching. Their prospects that they have that they're really high on are all position players. They need young pitching that they can develop, and the Dodgers have a ton of it. And the Dodgers are looking for a starter, maybe in the back end of the rotation that can get them down the stretch in the playoff hunt. That makes sense. And if Verlander is willing to go to LA, then I think that that's the trade that we're probably going to see. I know that the Astros were linked to him also, but I think the Dodgers are probably the best fit for the Mets to make a trade for Verlander with.
Yeah, I think so too. I hope not, but it does make sense because they'll be. Yeah, it's fine. The Mets. I'm telling you, Tommy. Like I know Mets fans are frustrated that didn't work out this year. They're going to come out of this and they're going to reload their system and they're just going to be able to go spend a bunch of money again in the offseason. Like it didn't work with Scherzer and Verlander, but you just so happen to like fall into having maybe the two most valuable assets that ended up being out there. Like that's the advantage that big teams have over small teams. It's crazy. And they can just eat money to get a better prospect and like all this stuff that they can do that other teams just can't do. Man, it's not fair, but whatever. Another note here, Dalvin Cook leaves New York without a deal. We've been paying close attention to that only because we're so fond of and, have such interest in Breece Hall, who's coming off an injury, the Northwest grad, the Iowa State great, but no Dalvin Cook there yet to the Jets. Maybe that I don't know. I don't know, by the way, too, either when we say this, like, I don't know what the best thing for Breece Hall is. I just don't want him to get limited. I was so disappointed. He was off to such a great start last year. I don't want, Dalvin Cook to come in there and take away carries that could be Breece Hall's. But interesting that, here's another running back who, like we're talking about Dalvin Cook and Jonathan Taylor, like they're not even close to the same value, but he just can't get what he wants out there on the open market.
It's really difficult because you've seen what Dalvin Cook has done throughout the course of his career. And, he's kind of going on this tour. He went to the Patriots. He spent some time with the Jets, went to training camp for a day with the Jets and kind of just watched what they were doing. And I know that he's making these different visits and trying to figure out the best fit for him. But man, if there was a solid financial offer from any team, he would have taken it by now. So I think they're in a position where it's like, look, I'm going to go where I feel the most valued, and I'm not going to make a ton of money more than likely. But if the Jets feel like they want me and they're, I guess willing to come fairly close to what I want, it makes sense.
How much better does Dalvin Cook make the Jets? I mean, for real. Like, how much better right now is Dalvin Cook than Michael Carter? I don't think it's as much of a fit as everybody else does because they have Breece Hall there and a secondary option. If I'm the Jets, and Jonathan Taylor doesn't make sense either. I just don't know what Dalvin Cook gives them other than experience at the position and maybe a safety net to Breece Hall. I mean, it makes some sense. It doesn't make as much sense as Miami does, though. If you're the Dolphins, by the way, aren't you the team that needs to be calling the Colts right now and saying, hey, let's make a Jonathan Taylor deal done right now. If Jonathan Taylor played for the Dolphins, and I haven't seen that rumored, by the way, I just like in my head, that's who I keep thinking of, the Dolphins or the Bills. And the Bills have James Cook, Dalvin's brother, ironically. But the Dolphins especially, don't you do that? I mean, how much better and more of a contender would you think of the Dolphins if they had Jonathan Taylor?
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, that absolutely increases your chances of not only winning that division, but at that point, I think you're inserted into the conversation to win the conference.
I do too. I would get super aggressive on that if I were the Dolphins. And the Colts, Jim Irsay, he was stubborn with Jeff Saturday, maybe just as stubborn, and say, absolutely not. We're not losing this PR battle. 869-1240. I think that gets us through the headlines of the day. It's been a strange day. There's all kinds of stuff.
Toppers Plus Truck Accessories has moved to a new location at 333 Northwest Street. We're ready to hook you up for trailer season, whether you're towing your boat, cycle, RV, or lawn equipment. Toppers Plus has receiver hitches, goosenecks, fifth wheel hitches, brake controllers, and trailer wiring. Choose from top brands like B&W Hitches made in Kansas or Reese, Kurt, and Draw Type. Hitches matter. Get trailer season ready at Toppers Plus. New location, 333 Northwest Street or toppersplusks.com.
Make the truck work for you!
Get back to business with Computer Depot. We're the easy button when it comes to getting your productivity grind on. We beat the competition on price with huge savings on laptops, desktops, tablets, and accessories, keeping more money in your pocket for whatever else you need. All makes and models start at less than $80. Computer Depot has the best product, deepest selection, and lowest prices. We'll even beat Amazon. Plus, we offer free diagnostics on all repairs. Get back to business with either of our locations, Pawnee and Seneca or Lincoln and Woodlawn. It's Computer Depot.
We're going abroad for the first time in years.
All right, that's it for us, everybody, on this Monday edition. We'll be back tomorrow. Jim Rome up next, Bob and Jeff from 2 to 4, then CBS Sports Radio programming as the Royals day off. Maybe that's a good thing so they can focus in on get some guys traded, turning this thing back around. We'll have the latest on the trade deadline tomorrow as we get even closer to it. Tommy Castor and Chad Chambers, I'm Jake Albracht. We'll see you Tuesday.